Yep. The host, of course, today is 4D, and 4D launched a project, Wakanda, and I hope you all know about it. In a moment, you definitely will. An open source platform, JavaScript platform for developing apps. And Jueregen Fesslmeier, who's right over there, is a web developer. He's the product manager for Wakanda. He's a web developer, open source developer, web entrepreneur, and product manager for Wakanda.org. He gives presentations about JavaScript, server-side JavaScript, NoSQL, and Wakanda, of course. And he participates in web standards mailing lists, makes technical recommendations to anything related to HTML and HTTP and JavaScript. He works to promote JavaScript as a professional language. And right here, Thibaud, as a kid, Thibaud wanted to be the commander of an aircraft carrier. He later changed his mind and worked as an emergency medical doctor, and then he spent many years programming with 4D, C++, and JavaScript for his own small software engineering company. He joined the 4D R&D group in 2008, and he worked on 4D and Wakanda product lines, and is now senior software evangelist, traveling around the world talking about Wakanda. I'm jealous. That sounds awesome. I love the evangelist title. Fantastic. His latest aspiration is to be a rock star. But unfortunately, you can't sing. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So instead, why don't you tell us a bit about software?
Yeah,
do you mind?
good.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can we switch to this one?
Ah, yes, I'll switch you. So are we switching to that one right there?
Yeah. Thank you. So, well, I'm Thibaud, and you are? Okay, good. So we are going to talk about the benefit of using a full JavaScript stack to build a business web application. So just before talking about the full stack, we need to define, Jueregen, what is a business web application?
Sure. Most of you probably have written the business app in the past. And so now let's talk. I can't hear you. Is my mic? My mic is off. I'm sorry. So most of you have. Can you hear me now? No. Hello? Okay. So as most of you have actually written business apps, I'm assuming, we want to talk about business apps for, written in JavaScript, right? So there are a couple of things that all business apps have in common, and those is the data, right? Data is really important. Data is at the heart of your application, and data is structured usually. You structure it, using data sets or using relationships, and you as a developer set those relationships up, right? Next thing is what's really at the heart of every application are the business rules, and you want to keep those business rules as close to the data as possible, because if anything changes in your data, in your schema, then you want to change the business rules as well very quickly. And next is you actually want to make your application available to your client, or we want to make it available to our clients as easy as possible. So that's in the browser. With HTML5 and CSS3, we have really the possibility to have very rich client experiences. We can create them not only on the desktop, but we also can create them on smartphones. You mentioned it, right? We can do them on the desktop, as mentioned. We can also have tablet apps. And we'll see more of those as we go. And maybe not even sticking to connected applications in the browser, but also offline applications. Next thing is security. Security is a very, very big thing, and in almost every app you have user authentication, or you have user groups and roles, and you define who has access to which information in the application. So you want to maybe bake this thing into a framework or an application development environment. And so this is not only authentication, but we're also talking about data integrity, right? You want to make sure that your database stays alive and keeps the data consistent. And finally, you want to easily deploy your application. So as easy as with one click, and not only to the public cloud, right? You also may want to just deploy your application to your infrastructure, your own ecosystem, or your customer's infrastructure. So you want to make that experience as easy as possible. And you want to take an application, maybe also to an app store, as we have seen, and you want to make this experience as easy as possible. So how do you create business apps today?
Today, to create business web app, we have three main stacks, plus other tools, but three main stacks. We have the LAMP stack, so Linux and so on. You may want to use Microsoft tools, so you're using C#, SQL Server, and so on. Or you have the Java stack, and you're using the tools available for Java. If you don't want to use one of the three main stacks, and recently more and more people are using other different pieces and mix them to create their business web application. But here, I've just talked about the back end. You still need to handle the communication between the client and the server. And as we're talking about the client, you need to handle the fragmentation. So you have all these devices, all these operating systems, and you need to mix all these. So you need to mix languages, you need to mix technologies, you need to find specialists of each of them, rocket scientists or whatever, and make them work together. So the whole process is really cumbersome. It's cumbersome to develop, it's a nightmare to debug, and it's really complicated to maintain and to add evolution. So at the end, what we just need is quite simple and quite easy. We just need a database to store the data, a server to set the data and answer to client requests. We need a client library to build the interface, and the protocol to communicate. And as we're talking on business web application, we communicate using HTTP. So how JavaScript fits in this whole stack?
So we think that JavaScript is ready for business, and that's because we think JavaScript is great, and it really performs well. It's super fast, and we're very excited. So just going back a little, 17 years ago, we had JavaScript for the first time in the browser, and now JavaScript is in every browser, in every mobile device, in every of your notebooks. The JavaScript community has really evolved over the last 17 years, and we have, every day pretty much, at least here in the Bay Area, we have meetup groups about JavaScript, about web development. We have a huge popularity of JavaScript worldwide. Not only that, also we have tools and frameworks nowadays, libraries like, as you all know, jQuery or Prototype, JSLint to parse JavaScript are great testing frameworks, and they have really caught up. But in fact, they have also created a bit of a problem, right, for the browser, because suddenly the apps written with these frameworks, they were not as fast and performing again. So we saw like the browser wars, right? So we saw browser engines catch up to that and basically pre-compile JavaScript to make it really fast. And nowadays we have several engines available, right? And what you see here on the slide here is basically that the difference between all of these engines in speed is really not that big. So 1 year ago, when this is a Sun Spider benchmark test, you have to run really a lot of JavaScript code in order to do these benchmarks. So 1 year ago, this benchmark was run also against all those engines, and the result is they were they came out all pretty simple as well. They were just half the speed, or in other words, this year around they're twice as speed as a year ago. So that really makes the case for JavaScript there.
And also, we should have written pros and cons, but the fact is that we think JavaScript has no bad parts.
Really?
More. Do you want me to say I think?
Yeah.
Okay. I think JavaScript has no bad part, but only good part. It's just a question of knowing the language you're using. So, yeah, we hear from developers of other language, or in blogs here and there, we hear people ranting against JavaScript. You know, well, it's a toy for a kid. It's slow. It's not a real object-oriented environment, and all these kind of things that we can hear about JavaScript since JavaScript exists. But it starts to be a bit painful to hear this, because at the end, all this is just because people saying that just don't really know the language. So they should just learn JavaScript. I mean, you're supposed to know the tool you're using to create your business. If a desktop application crashes because a C developer forgot, or the C developer just dereferenced the full pointer, nobody blames C as a language, as a bad language. It's just the developer just made a mistake. So we should just don't care about what other people are saying about JavaScript. It's ready for business. And as we're talking about business application, we'll need to talk about the server side, because obviously a business app handles data, and the data is on the server. So is JavaScript ready also for the server?
Yes, totally, of course, right? I mean, JavaScript was on the server right from the beginning when Netscape launched, their server, and there was a bit of a break in between, back then and until 2007, 2008. So libraries, nowadays you see libraries and engines basically catching up, and JavaScript is available on the server. And there's multiple, choices that you can make. There's great NoSQL databases. There's great application servers and so forth. We have just listed a couple of those. And yes, these application servers, the JavaScript on the server is really available in production environment today. So big name companies are using those in production environments, such as Craigslist, eBay, and so forth. They are using JavaScript on the client and on the server. So that's really making the case for JavaScript here. So JavaScript is really everywhere, and it's ready for business. So as you may have seen this at the beginning, right? You remember this slide? And now we can really put JavaScript on the client, JavaScript on the server, communicating with the client with HTTP and REST and so forth. And the database nowadays is also a NoSQL database running JavaScript. And the whole thing communicates with JavaScript on, right? With JS on. So everything is there. JavaScript is everywhere. And
yeah, and you still need the right tool. And that's what we wanted to do with Wakanda, is to make your life as developer of business web app easier. So to build a unified platform. So even if you're using JavaScript in the whole stack, you still don't need to spend time making sure that you're using the correct version of this framework that works only with this database and so on. We wanted just to help business web app developers to concentrate solving the problems, not how to get the data, how to fill user interface widgets, but solving the problem, creating the business rule. So what should be a unified environment in this situation is having a development tool to create the business logic and to handle the data, tool that makes it easy to deploy your application. You want to develop the client part in the same environment as the server part, and you want to have the tools to administrate your deployed application, and all this along with JavaScript. So now maybe enough talking. Well, I like to talk, but enough talking, and some example.
So let's switch.
I switched. What is your number?
No, it's actually 3. So we talked about the whole process of creating business applications at the beginning of our presentations, and now we actually want to show how this works in Wakanda. So as you can see this already. Okay, so we're launching Wakanda here. This is Wakanda Studio, so this is what you would expect from a modern IDE. Okay, and as we said, data is really at the heart of your application, so that's exactly where we want to start. So let's.
Sorry.
Oh, now you don't see it. Oh,
I'm trying every button that's here, Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, go back.
No worries.
Go on.
Okay. So I just launched Wakanda Studio, and so basically this is the IDE, the environment where we're creating our applications. So the first thing is we want to really focus on the data and the business model. So that's where we're going to start. And this model editor, which is basically mapping graphically to JavaScript, helps us in getting there. So we're going to first create our data set, our data models, our attributes, and so forth. So let's go ahead and do that. First, we want to create an employee class. We want to add a couple of attributes, like first name, last name, salary, and so forth. Well, let's do that. First name is of type string. Last name, type string. Salary, type number, so these are basic data types. Gender, and so forth. There you go. You also saw the IDE helps you to complete the data types. In addition, we want to have another data class because employees, they work in companies. So we're going to create the company data class. And a company usually has a name and can have some revenue, right? And so we want to create relations, right? So those two data classes are obviously related to each other because an employee works at a company. So that's just another attribute, which is called a relational attribute. We're going to add that. And now that we have a company, we can just assign the company data type, right? And as we do that, that relation is right there. And on the company data class, we also have automatically the attribute created, the reverse attribute created, which is the employees collection, right? We want to change that to employees to make it a little bit easier. So there you go. You have that relationship in there. And the model is built in JavaScript. It's important to notice that the model is sort of what the schema is, and there is no SQL in the background. There is no other code generation in the background. This is also not object relational mapping. The model is the structure. That's very important to notice. And we can really use relationships here, as we are used to from ORM mapping tools. And we don't use MapReduce. So you would just naturally query this database, as we're going to show you in a little bit. So we have actually, in order to speed things up, we have created a full model. Just looks the same, has more attributes. We have filled it with data. And we're going to create a user interface on top of it. So I'm going to invite Thibaud to create that for us.
Okay, so here we have a kind of final model with the same and a bit more attribute here. The company related to the employee. So we have declared persistent object, and objects with the Wakanda DB, it's an object data store, persist with their relation. So I want to show you what's really at the heart of Wakanda. So I just want to display a list. Actually, I'm not doing this one. I want this one, a new page for a tablet. So I want to display a list of companies, and when the user selects a company, you get all the employees working for this company in an iPad interface. So this is the studio, the GUI designer of the studio. We have widget, we drag-drop widget. We can change all the properties, font, style, color, background, using CSS3. So we are short in time, so I'm not doing fancy stuff, just the basic one. So I drag and drop a split view. Then I drop a grid, and here is the key point. I bind the grid to the company data source. I take just a second to align the thing. Okay. Now I create another grid, which will be bound to the employees attribute of the current selected company. So I'm removing some of the attribute. So here we are. I just declare the model and bind the data model to the user interface widget. And here we are. So we are in the tablet. We can scroll. It has the look and feel and the way it works with some flashy effect. Cool. So you see when I like it. I mean, it's modern. It's an iOS 7 in new interface, actually. So when I select a company, you can see the list of employees on the right is changing. So this is really what I wanted to show this small example, because this is really all the philosophy of the product. You declare your model, you spend time on the model and business rules. Here we have no real complicated business rule, but you declare your model and your relation, you bind them to a user interface widget, and then Wakanda handles getting the data asynchronously, filling the widget, and so on. And you have seen that you don't need to query, no need to write a query to get the employees working for the current company. No need to map reduce, as you would do in MongoDB, to get all the employees working for the company and so on. It's just here. So you don't need to write a single line of code for this kind of thing. I mean, you really need, we want you to concentrate on solving the problems of the business web app, because you want to write code.
So, yeah, actually, let's see some code. I mean, we're all JavaScript developers here, and we want to go back and actually show you some server-side queries, right? Let me just do that. Some example queries. So this first one is basically using the data source on the server side. So you remember the data class we created, employee. We can just, with a dot notation, go through employee query, and to query for the employees with salaries greater than $195,000. Boom, it's there. The result is shown here. Could run, one more query, all, companies who have employees that have a certain salary. So as you see here, can just make this part of the query string, employees.salary, that relation, basically. And then we say .length to get the count of those companies that we have in the database. Not only can we do queries on the server, of course, we can do pretty much the same query on the client side, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So let's go back into the designer here, WYSIWYG designer for desktop application. So let's actually take a grid, just as Thibaud did a moment ago, on a tablet. Resize that a little bit, make it resizable. And again, the important part is that you bind the company data class as a data source to the widget. Now that is bound, and we want to show a live query. So as the user types, we want to actually live query that data set. So we're going to add a text input here. Resize it. We bind it to the on key up. So on the client side, remember we're on the client side now. This time we're going to use the Wakanda framework, and the namespace is WAF. We have data sources, as I just showed you, and the data source we want to access is company. We can query companies pretty much the same way as we did on the server side. So we say name equals, and then we get that name from the widget itself, right? From the text input. Get the value. So this looks right. And let's run it. So boom, let's launch this, and let's see a live query, right? It's very easy. Cool. Now that we have built sort of our client application, we want to deploy that app, to the cloud. So we're going to preview a feature here, which we call like one-click deployment. And before you deploy your application to the cloud, you actually need to check it into your local repository. We are using Git. We bake that into the environment. So let's just add this entire solution to a Git repository. Now, as you see, it takes a sec. These green lights basically indicate the Git repository is there, and all the files have been added to it. So now we are actually ready to deploy. If I can find the... I need to actually go to the deploy button, but... There you go. So again, you access the deploy functionality through a toolbar, and you pretty much just play proceed. Now, what's happening in the background? The virtual machine is, loaded up, initialized. We're packaging up the whole solution in a Git package, pushing it to the server, and eventually launch it in just a couple of seconds. So while this is going on, maybe we'll show you another really cool stuff. Now that we have deployed to the cloud, we actually want to show you how you can develop on the cloud.
Yeah, because we are setting up on a distant cloud the virtual machine, so it takes some minutes. Just want to show you a really cool feature we're working on. It's in our labs, actually. So not only you want to deploy your application in the cloud, but maybe you want the full stack available in the cloud. So this is in our lab, and this is the studio running in Safari in the cloud. So you will be able, in a few time, to handle and to develop from the cloud. So I'm creating a new solution about pizzas, for example. and I'm adding a new project to this solution. And I'm in Safari, and I have the model, because the studio, main part of the studio, all the user interface you have, the design, the model designer, the GUI designer, is written in JavaScript. So we are working on putting everything in the browser. So I have about the same thing as Jueregen did a few moments ago. So I have my pizza, and let's say just a name, and it's enough. So I save the model, I run the server, and I'm just taking this URL, and it's here, but you don't see it, it's invisible. Bien sûr, of course. I forgot to create the page. You're right. I should, Wakanda would do everything for me, actually, but you have work to do. So, again, now you know what we do with grids and so on. Is it saved? Yes. I made it visible, so now it's okay. So I can add my pizzas here, whatever, margarita and so on. Another one is available. So this is the studio in the cloud. It's in our lab, and it's really a super cool feature we're working on, because we know a lot of people want to work from everywhere.
So let's actually check back with our deployment.
2 minutes left.
In the studio. It's done. It takes just very few times. So should be up and running. I did actually create the data of the form. And as you can see, you can just use it as you were using it on, thank you, on the desktop. And that pretty much wraps up the demos, right?
We have the import of MySQL.
We have the import demo.
Yeah. We understand actually a couple more. Sorry. So we have 2 more minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, 3.
Okay.
3.5, please. So here what we want to do is to import some data from MySQL. So I have a blank project, no data class, no data. I have a MySQL database called name, a classical one with cities, countries, country language, and so on. And I want to import this data in Wakanda. Since some months already available in Wakanda, we have a WAF MySQL module that lets you to communicate with MySQL and import and manipulate the data. So we are using this module to import this database. So I'm connecting to the MySQL database, and I'm importing the model. So now back in Wakanda, I need to reload the model actually. I have my model that have been created from MySQL, including the foreign key and the primary keys and so on. So now I just want to import the data. So it's using the WAF MySQL module. And if we go in the data browser, we have our cities, countries, and so on. So a quick way to import your data, and because we're short in time, we just switch to the slides.
OK.
It's two.
So that pretty much wraps our demos app, and we just want to say a few things about. We actually worked together with Thibaud just 2 weeks ago, and we developed an app, a prototype, with him. And this prototype is about, evaluating their partners, how they're doing. Basically, it's an internal app. We just help them in a couple of days to basically create this thing. And this is very exciting. We're going to talk about this and other stuff tomorrow. Sorry, about Wakanda. Go ahead and grab us. We're here to help. And
thank you for listening.
Very much.
Thank you.